It is very good. I'm honored to be here. Most of my legal career was spent as a chief attorney with the Commission on Judicial Conduct in New York State, investigating unethical judges. And we had a lot to do. New York has some of the worst judges in the country. And every year we probably removed or disciplined more judges than the rest of the country combined. So we had a really good. So I retired in 2003, and a few years later, I heard about a local imam who had been arrested on a terrorism charge, and I said, wow, this sounds interesting. Maybe I'll just volunteer with the defense. And so I spent a lot of time working on the defense of the imam, Yasin Aref, and I got to know him very well. It was absolutely obvious to me that there was no evidence that this guy had engaged in any form of terrorism whatsoever. The case was entirely manufactured by the government. It was simply a fake case. And I could sit there, I could talk to Yasin, and he would say, look, they're charging me with this and this and this. And every single one of those things is a lie, and I can prove it. And here it is. Here's the proof that it is a lie. And we would go to the government and say, this is a lie. And they would say, oh yeah, okay, forget it. We'll charge you with something else. It kind of went on like that, and eventually we go to trial. He was convicted. If you doubt my characterization of it, there's a wonderful movie that was made of it called Witness about the Yasin Aref trial. And you can get it on your television if you want to see it. And it really goes through and details all of the things that the tricks the government tried to prove. But in any event, he was sentenced to 15 years in jail. And at the end of after the sentencing, the prosecutors held a press conference. And there was a lot of question in the press about the case. It just didn't seem to make any sense at all. And so at one point, one of the newspaper reporters said, yes, but do you have any evidence that Yasin was a terrorist? We didn't see anything when we went to the trial, and we didn't see anything. And the government, the U.S. attorney, was sort of caught by surprise, and I can quote this verbatim. He goes, no, we had no evidence that he was a terrorist, but he had the ideology. In order to preempt anything from happening, we decided to undertake this sting. And I suddenly, reading this over again later, it came as a flash to me that this was their rationale for what they were doing. They were trying to protect the country by preemptively convicting people who they had some suspicion or some concern about. The other ironic thing was that there was absolutely nothing that would have triggered it. He was a very peaceful man. He was opposed to terrorism. He said so repeatedly during the sting. But I think it was because of the FBI actually mixed him up with somebody else and thought he was another person, and then later found out and said, oh, the hell with it, we'll just go ahead and complete the sting. But in any event, it was the first time in my life that I had ever seen a deliberate framing of an innocent man. And I never got over it. I had never seen that before, and to this day, it is just something that was absolutely amazing to me. And then we began to see more cases like it. And all over the country, one after another, we began to find these cases, and we started to call them preemptive prosecutions. Prosecuting people before they commit a crime, based on your suspicion as to what they may be doing in the future. And that's being charitable, I think, to the FBI at the time. And I love Mel's reference to Friends of Human Rights here, when you stood up, because we also formed a group in Albany, same as you did. Gene Finley, Kathy Manley, Lynn Jackson, and myself. And for 20 years we've been doing this. We are best of friends. We do an awful lot of things together, including going around the country together. And we were so fortunate to have found Mel and to found CCF, and they sort of brought us in, and we became part of this group of people that have been deeply affected by what happened to people in our communities that we know is an injustice. And we have seen the injustices in other places, and we know that there's something fundamentally wrong, and we cannot stop talking. Later, Kathy Manley and I wrote a book called Inventing Terrorists. What we did was we took the FBI's list of cases that they had prosecuted, the terrorism cases. There are 603 of them that they claimed were terrorists. And we analyzed them and concluded that 94% of them involved preemptive prosecution in one way or another. In other words, the whole campaign of these 600 people that they were holding up as essentially a terrorist army, an invading force, a group of disloyal Americans who were going to stab us in the back, was a complete fraud. It was not the case. These were innocent people that had been trained, basically, or pushed into crimes by the FBI. So that's my background. So they started this project to target a synagogue and an Air Force base. And as they got into it, and they got 3 other people, so they had 4 of them in there. None of them had any money, none of them had a job, none of them even had a car. They had no resources to do anything, but they all saw this was a chance to make money. And then no money showed up, so they all started to back out. So Cromedy said, oh, not Cromedy, but Shahid Hussein, the informant, said, oh, you don't want it? We've got $250,000. My jihadi folks back in Pakistan will give you $250,000 if you blow up the synagogue. Oh yeah, then they came back in again. That's buying crime. This is going out and literally the government buying crime so that they can solve it to show how good they are. It is one of the most immoral things that a government can do. And for some reason the FBI just didn't see the immorality of it. But anyway, they got their conviction. The cynicism on this thing is just breathtaking. They had the only thing that they wanted these 4 guys to do was to take a bomb and put it next to the synagogue. Then they immediately arrested it. They had a helicopter coming over with troopers coming down on ropes, machine guns. They had an armored personnel carrier. They had all of this filmed and put onto the evening news at night under the headline, FBI breaks up international terrorist ring. So this was a publicity stunt designed to boost the FBI and just exploit the fear within this community, which was one of the poorest communities in New York. After they served 15 years, we went back to the trial judge and said, Judge, look at this case. This is a complete mess. This is the government preying on young, poor kids who just got out of jail, had nothing going on, and the manipulation that went on for no purpose at all. And the judge agreed and let them out of jail 10 years earlier, and also blasted the government and said this is immoral what the government is doing. They should not be doing this. No government in the world should be targeting its own citizens to make itself look good without any possibility, and she said this in the decision, there was no possibility that these defendants could have done any of these things that were supposedly done in the charge in the document. They had no resources to do it, and yet the government went ahead with it. So I just want to say that there is at least one judge somewhere that recognized this and has blasted the government for it.
And I'll say real quick too, the quote from the judge actually, in her decision, she said, the FBI invented this conspiracy, which is huge, right? Again, as Steve mentioned, as were it not for their involvement, there would not have been a conspiracy, right? So if that was the decision in this case, right? I mean, just extrapolate that further and think about these other cases that have been prosecuted, where again, the government is inventing, they're creating, they're manufacturing the conditions for a conspiracy when one does not exist.